National Geographic Learning. Before we get started, I want to share with you how you can interact with us during today's session. For your questions, please drop those in the Q&A box, and you can use the chat, as you're already doing, to say hello, for general interaction or comments during the session. We thought it would be a good idea today, as maybe you're starting to wrap up your lessons for a nice long break, to mix things up a little bit. Instead of slides and a prepared presentation, we have a special guest interview today who I will introduce in just a moment. Thinking back on the last few years, it feels like there's been just so much change, or maybe not change, but maybe growth is a better word. The classes we teach, the materials and the tools that we use to deliver lessons, even the students themselves, all look a little bit different than they did even just a few years ago. At the same time, the important tasks that you do every day remain roughly the same. You're still planning and teaching your lessons, you're still giving your students opportunities to practice new language, and you're still tracking their progress against course objectives. Those tasks haven't really changed much, but the way that you carry out those tasks may have. And that's what we're going to focus our conversation on today. We've invited Matt Nespoli, Vice President of Technical Product Management at National Geographic Learning, to share his perspective on this topic. Welcome, Matt. Could you start by telling us a little bit about your role here at National Geographic Learning?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Nespoli. I'm the Vice President and Head of Technology for National Geographic Learning. And my responsibility is our digital learning platforms and basically ensuring that those digital learning platforms provide a great experience to all of you, to teachers and students around the world. I lead a team of roughly 50 software engineers, digital product managers, and digital publishers, and we're all focused on building great digital experiences into our platforms.
Okay, so digital experiences. So your team, Matt, you're exclusively focused on the digital teaching and learning tools that are used to deliver our programs. So for all ages, all segments, things like classroom presentation tools, online practice assignments, things like that. Is that right?
That's right, yes. Everything that goes into the different tools that we create for teachers and for students and for administrators, whether it's the classroom presentation tool that teachers use during class, or the homework activities that students might do, after class, all the way to the different, companion audio and video files that come into a given product that someone adopts. All those things are within our purview.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you and your teams are responsible for in terms of digital strategy, how it all comes together?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing is, as you said, thinking through what our digital strategy is. And, the types of questions we think about there are, what do we want to be known for at National Geographic Learning in terms of the digital platforms and digital tools that we create for teachers and students in the classroom? What do we want to be better than, anyone else in the market at doing, at helping our customers achieve? And how do we get there over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the most important things that we need to tackle next? So that's really the first thing, is just, putting together our overarching strategy for how we want to help customers be better teachers and better students in the classroom and outside of it. The second one would be putting together our multi-year roadmap. We want to think multiple years ahead and think about all the things that we want to do, not just next year, but over the next 3 to 5 years. To advance the teaching and learning experience through the platforms that we can provide. And then the last thing is really thinking about the day-to-day and overseeing the work of all of those different software engineers that I mentioned, or digital product managers, publishing teams, all the work that we do day in and day out to make sure that the things that we do build into our platform are as easy to use and intuitive and valuable as possible.
Okay, so that's a big team and a big responsibility, right? Clearly, digital teaching and learning tools, our platforms, these are important priorities for us. Why do you think it's so important to invest in this area?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it was the sort of big question on my mind when I joined National Geographic Learning a few years ago. I joined, sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, And, we did, as you can imagine, a lot of outreach and research with customers as they started to navigate the pandemic to really understand what was happening and what trends we could sort of glean from how behavior was changing as everyone went online during the pandemic.
Mhm.
And a few trends really stood out when we started talking to teachers and administrators about how they were changing and how things have changed since then over the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic. I think the first thing that stands out to me is that if we think about just usage of digital overall, usage of our digital platforms and all the tools that we provide, it's really increased significantly over the last 3 years. If we think about where a lot of our teachers and students were before the pandemic, a lot of teachers and students were using digital here or there, maybe sometimes or maybe not at all. And that's really changed since 2020. Usage has really skyrocketed in our digital platforms, and that usage has continued to grow year over year. Even this year, as a lot of teachers and students have gone back to face-to-face teaching, we still see digital usage increasing. So that's really the first thing. Usage has really increased significantly.
Mhm.
The second thing that really stood out, which I think leads to the importance of our work here in our digital team, is the perception of the value of digital learning technology has changed significantly over the course of the pandemic as well.
Mhm.
We talked to teachers and students before the pandemic. A lot of perceptions were that digital was a nice to have. It was supplemental to the printed textbook. It was something that some people thought wasn't necessary at all, and there was no usage at all.
Mhm.
And really now what we see is, we did a big survey last year, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Mhm.
One of the questions we asked was, how valuable do you think digital learning technology is in improving the teaching and learning experience? And 75% of teachers and administrators who completed that survey said, we think it's extremely valuable. That's really a big shift from where we were about 3 years ago. I think the third thing that comes to mind is that, current publisher platforms, generally speaking, are just not easy enough to use. And I think this was true before the pandemic, but it's remained true, over the last few years, that we are just generally speaking across the publishing industry, not doing a good enough job meeting the needs of our teachers and students, even though there's an enormous potential for our platforms and our content to come together and provide a great experience to help teachers and students get many things done in the classroom and outside of it.
Mhm. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that digital tools are used more than ever and are more important than ever, right? That's kind of what you're starting to hear through some of this research. I'd like to take this opportunity to sense check that with our audience here today, with the first of a couple of polls that we're going to launch during the session. So Emily, if you could pull up the first poll, I'm curious to know, are you currently using some sort of digital tool to do your job, whether it's outside of the class or in the class today? And try to get roughly, half of our participants to answer. We've got 135 now. I'll leave it open for another second or two. I think that's probably good. So of those of you who answered the poll, over 90% of you are using some sort of digital tool in your teaching practice. In a minute, we're going to discuss a major research project that Matt's team carried out recently. And in that research, we heard something similar. Around 95% of teachers are using some sort of technology to do their work. So this, I think, Matt, lines up with your research pretty well, right? 93%. You heard 95 in the research that you did over the last couple of years. So we know that digital tools, digital resources are useful in the classroom. They have value, and the right tools can really transform the learning experience for students and the teaching experience for teachers. You also said, and we also know, that there's work to be done to improve on these tools that are currently available today. Where do you even begin to address something like that?
Yeah, it's a very tough question. And, I think one of the privileges of, and one of the challenges as well of, leading technology for National Geographic Learning is just our reach. We serve such a large global customer base.
Mhm.
We have over 50,000 teachers that we serve in our platforms every year. And I said that's growing significantly year over year. And that's over 50 countries around the world we see, teachers coming into the platform. We serve over 1 million students every year in our platforms. And so because of this, we need to figure out how do we, across such a large global customer base, how do we identify the most important customer needs that are shared by the vast majority of our global customer base? And how do we avoid focusing on needs that, may be important to some customers, maybe some particularly large customers or vocal customers, but that aren't broadly shared across our global customer base. And so that's, the big challenge that we face day in and day out. And when we were thinking about how to respond in the pandemic to all of the, sort of new needs that were emerging, we needed a framework to think about how to find that, sort of common set of priorities.
Mm.
And we ultimately landed on a framework called Jobs to be Done. And Jobs to be Done is a theory that some of you may have heard of. It's been around for a while. It's a theory that started in Harvard Business School by a professor there named Clay Christensen. And it's basically an idea that says that, customers buy a product or a service to help them get a specific job done that they're responsible for doing or that they're trying to do in their personal lives, and that they can't do as well as they would like with the, existing tools they have available to them. And so we ended up doing a year of research in 2021 and into this year to really focus on and understand what our customers' jobs to be done were. What were the things that they were responsible for getting done in their roles as teachers and administrators, and of course as students as well. And where were there opportunities to help our customers get more of their jobs done better or faster using our digital platforms. So that's really where we started.
Okay, so you're really looking for the sweet spot, the kinds of enhancements or even brand new tools that will help the most teachers in the most classrooms be successful, regardless of where they're located in the world, regardless of the learners that they're working with, or even the types of classrooms that they might be teaching in. You mentioned a research project that your team recently carried out. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, we really wanted to understand, first of all, was the demand for these digital learning tools, was it temporary? Was it a temporary need to get through the pandemic? Or did we expect it to be permanent? So that was the first thing we tried to dig into. And then the second one was, as I was saying, where can we help customers get more jobs done? Or for the jobs that we're already sort of helping them get done in some way, shape, or form, how can we help them get that job done more holistically using a sort of better solution that we can provide? So over that year-long research project that I mentioned, we started with interviewing 50 teachers and administrators around the world. And we asked them, tell us all the things that you're responsible for getting done over the course of a year in your role as a teacher or as an administrator. We heard about 25 common jobs. These were things like, administer tests or conduct live lessons, or, if you're an administrator, hire teachers or train teachers. We basically, from that list of 25, we thought about, what are the jobs where we can actually help teachers or administrators get this done better or faster using a tool that we can provide in our platforms. And we landed on about 6 jobs to be done where we thought, okay, we could really help here. So then what we did was we really dug into each of those 6 jobs in detail. We interviewed another 150 teachers and administrators, and we asked them to walk us through, what goes into this job? How do you get it done step by step? So if you think about something like administering a test, we asked them to walk us through that process. How do you administer a test? What's challenging? What's time consuming? What's frustrating? What problems do you encounter when you're trying to get this job done? And we wrote down all the different things that emerged all the customer needs that we thought we were hearing. And at the end of that process, we ended up with about 1,000 different customer needs across those 6 jobs. So these are all the little things that we thought we could help in terms of building specific solutions to the jobs that customers were trying to get done. So obviously 1,000 customer needs is a lot. We can't prioritize solutions to all 1,000 of those. So we then launched a survey, and this was the survey I was mentioning before. And we basically asked customers to look at each of those 1,000 needs and tell us how important each one was to them and how satisfied they were with their ability to meet each of those needs today with the solutions they have available to them. And based on those survey results, we basically created our digital strategy. We figured out which needs were, we thought were most important for us to solve for customers, and where we want to be the best in the market in terms of the solutions we provide and the needs that we help customers achieve.
Wow. That sounds like a very comprehensive, very in-depth research project. Let me try to summarize all of that just to make sure that we're all on the call understanding it correctly. So you talked to a lot of educators, a lot of instructors, either directly through interviews or through surveys. And through those conversations, you were able to identify 6 big jobs that teachers are doing on a regular basis. Things like preparing lessons, teaching classes, assessing learner progress. But then you took those 6 jobs and you broke them down even deeper. You dug deeper to identify 1,000 very specific tasks that teachers are doing every day. And I see some comments in the chat. Rasa saying, my teaching practice is 50 different little things in a day. So that seems to be ringing true, right? That even within these big jobs of teaching a lesson, you're identifying the content, you're maybe breaking your class up into small groups, you're doing all of these things to manage the flow of that lesson that go into the big job of teaching a live class, right?
Right.
Could you give us another example of some of those very specific tasks that go into a bigger job?
Yeah, and I think what's important to understand is when we tried to understand what those specific needs were, we wanted to get to a level of detail that enabled us to know exactly what solutions that we needed to build. What we didn't want to do was, sort of keep it at a thematic level and then guess at which solutions we should build to address a thematic need. And so an example there is, when we were talking to teachers about their job of administering tests, a common thing that we heard in terms of, problems that they were encountering when administering tests was student cheating, and then the need that teachers had to prevent student cheating, especially during the pandemic with all the online assessment. Now we could have stopped there and said, okay, a teacher need is prevent student cheating. But the problem with that is, there are many different types of student cheating problems. You can cheat by sharing answers to test questions with peers. You can cheat by having someone else take the tests for you, a myriad other ways. And the solutions that we might create would be different depending on what specific cheating problems teachers are facing. And so we had to dig deeper, and in this case of preventing cheating, we identified 7 very specific needs around cheating prevention. And then each need was specific enough that we could figure out, okay, if this need comes back as really important, we know what solution we need to build.
Okay. We could probably spend the rest of the whole day today talking about the 1,000 specific tasks, but let's, at least for right now, keep things at a higher level, right? We only have a little bit of time. You mentioned 6 key teaching jobs that you dove into in your research, and you asked some of the teachers you spoke with, or I guess all of them, to rank those jobs as the most important jobs that they do day in and day out, that they could use some support from a digital tool, right? I'm curious to see how this group we have on the call today might answer a similar question. So in this poll, I want you all to tell us which teaching job is most important to you, where you would hope that a digital tool or solution could help you. We'll give you a couple minutes to dive in here. or a couple seconds rather. Okay, we have answers coming in. So we've got about a third of you responding so far, and there's really almost a 50-50 split here between actually teaching live lessons in a classroom with students and identifying and supporting students who are either high achievers or maybe need additional support. So the kind of performance tracking and assessing where learners are in their journey of learning English. Okay, we can pause there. I think that's a pretty good breakdown. Of course, all of these jobs are important, right? So assigning and grading tests, assigning and grading homework, being able to report out, whether it be to parents or to, management at your institution on how students are performing. These are all important, but you're kind of looking at teaching live lessons and supporting students as 1 and 2. And I think, Matt, maybe you can confirm teaching live lessons was the top job, I think, that most of who you spoke to said was important.
Yeah, it was definitely at the top of the list for teachers. Yes.
Okay. Maybe you could dive a little bit more into some of your learnings from the research. What were your main takeaways?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we use the jobs to be done theory to sort of frame our research and understand our customers' needs. Mm-hmm. And one of the tenets of jobs to be done theory is that whenever possible, customers look to a single product or a single platform to help them get as many jobs done as possible. Okay. Customers don't want to have to cobble together different solutions for every specific thing they're trying to get done. They want one-stop shop solutions wherever possible. If you think about some of the most successful products over the last 15 years, the iPhone, you can get hundreds if not thousands of different tasks or jobs done with the iPhone. Amazon, you can buy thousands and thousands of different things on Amazon, everything from diapers to food, etc. And so all of those different successful companies have found ways to help customers get many, many things done on a single platform. And so with that as context, one of the things that really stood out in our research was how current publisher platforms really do the opposite of what they should be doing based on what jobs to be done theory says. Rather than solving multiple customer jobs with one single platform, most publishers today require teachers to use different platforms for every individual job that they're trying to get done. And so if you just think about a typical example, if you want to use a sort of presentation tool to present the ebook, the student book during class, you have to use a classroom presentation tool that's sometimes on a USB, sometimes in a separate platform. If you want to create a test, you have to use a separate test creation platform. Mm-hmm. We use something called ExamView. If you want to assign homework, you go to the publisher's homework platform. If you want students to use an ebook, they have to go to a separate ebook platform, and so on and so forth. And all these different platforms require students to have to log in with a separate username and password, learn the user interface. And so it's very cumbersome and unnecessarily difficult instead of what it should be, which is a seamless one-stop shop solution. So that came out loud and clear that we need to do a better job as publishers to make things seamless on that single platform. The other big thing that came out in our research is that teachers and students today are increasingly trying to use digital in the classroom and outside of the classroom in new ways to experiment with new ways of teaching and learning, whether it's with flipped classrooms or fully online classes or high flex classes where some students attend class in person and some are online. We hear a lot of experimentation with these different modes of teaching today. And the current publisher platforms that are available across the market today weren't really built to provide seamless solutions across those different models. They were built really for a traditional face-to-face format where all students are in person and the teacher's in the front of the classroom. So, it was clear to me that we weren't really meeting the moment as publishers in terms of adapting our platforms to provide a great learning experience across all these new formats.
Right. That's really great insight, Matt. Thank you. I think I'm starting to pick up on a little bit of a theme here. And just to maybe say it another way, ease of use, right? Regardless of the type of classroom that you're operating in, the digital tools that you use need to be easy to find, easy to access, easy to use, right?
Right.
And I think the last point you made just now really hits that on the head directly. You mentioned earlier that you want to create tools that will work for as many teachers as possible. But at the same time, it's important to acknowledge, as you have, that more and more institutions and classrooms are experimenting with new models of delivery, right? You mentioned face-to-face, hybrid, fully remote classrooms. It's
Right.
great. It's great to hear that you're thinking about those different ways of teaching lessons as you go through the development process for new tools. And I'm curious, again, let's do another poll. I'm curious which types of classrooms those of you who are teaching classes right now are using or are operating in. Are you teaching primarily face-to-face, hybrid, remote? Are there other models that you're experimenting with? Okay, so we're getting lots of answers in fast and furious. Looks like about 2/3 of you are teaching face-to-face, while some of you are still doing some hybrid and remote as well. Even a handful of other types. There's lots of different experiments going on with asynchronous learning and all different kinds of things. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we're helping our students find success these days. Yeah, blended. Elliot's doing all of them. Absolutely. We're coming up on time, and we want to save some time for a question or two. But before we open the floor, I maybe want to pause here to share some exciting news. As a thank you to everyone who's joined us today, and especially everyone who's joined us multiple times across this season of webinars, I'd like to let you in on a little preview of what's coming from National Geographic Learning in 2023. In fact, in just a few weeks, well, I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. Here we go. In just a few weeks, we are going to be relaunching the online practice platform as Spark. Spark is an all-in-one platform that supports every stage of teaching and learning with our National Geographic Learning programs. So Spark not only delivers your online practice assignments for independent student reinforcement outside of the classroom, but it also hosts all of the resources you need for planning your classes. It hosts our classroom presentation tools and students' ebooks, online tests and quizzes through the assessment suite, a course gradebook for tracking student and class performance. So everything, all of the tools that Matt's team develops to support all of our programs will live in one place behind a single login with tools that are easy to find and easy to use. If you're already using online practice today, you'll notice a few changes come January, but everything you're using will be right where you left it when you come back from your breaks. If you haven't had a chance to explore our platform yet, there's no better time than now. We hope that you do. In the new year, request a demo, talk to your local National Geographic Learning representative to get in and see all of the great tools, all the great stuff that's in there now, and also be ready to see all of the great stuff that is coming really soon in the future. So I do want to stop here and maybe take some time to answer some questions, either about Spark or even just about any of the different themes and topics that Matt raised today. Okay, so I see a couple of things coming through. Actually, there was something earlier in the Q&A box, Matt, that I'm curious to get your opinion on. So there's a question about, what's the best platform for teaching classes? What's the best platform for online quizzes and exams? And, I'm sure there's lots of different options out there. Maybe rather than give specific answers to that question, how do you evaluate a tool and a platform? What are the things you're looking for when, putting yourself in a teacher's shoes? What are the most important criteria for a really good digital tool?
Well, so first and foremost, the tool has to be easy to get into. And as we've said before, if you have 6 different tools that you're offering, each serving a single point, sort of point solution for a given task, it's not easy to get in. Then you have to create a separate username and password. You have to know where to go. You have to figure out how to navigate once you first get in. And so it needs to be easy to get in, and you need to quickly figure out what you need to do. Teachers don't want to spend 4 hours learning how to do, a new platform every time they're trying to get a specific thing done.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the table stakes piece. And then what we really think about is how many things can we help teachers get done of that full list of tasks that they're trying to achieve within a given job. And so if you're trying to administer a test and there's 130 things that you need to do over the course of administering a test, we want our platforms to be able to help you get as many of those 130 things done as possible, not just 3 or 5 or 10.
Yep.
And I think this was another, big learning from our research was that, we were doing a good job in some areas of these jobs, but missing a whole big piece of the end-to-end job. And that's a big part of what we're building now into our platform is more holistic solutions for all these individual jobs.
Right. Maybe going back to that ease of access point that you've just made, there are questions I see coming through the chat about, does it sync with certain LMSs and how does it integrate in? And I think that's probably an important point too. I know you and your team have looked at, how do we ensure that our platform connects well with some of these other tools that are already in place in different institutions around the world.
Yeah, happy to do that. One thing that was loud and clear in our research was just how common, sort of traditional learning management systems have become. We heard that 96% of teachers and administrators were now using a learning management system, whether it's Canvas or Moodle, or even things like Google Classroom. And so, we have to think of ourselves as a publisher and the platforms we provide, not in a vacuum, but as part of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And one of the key ways we do that is thinking about integration with those learning management systems. Yeah. So you don't have to create a username and password, or so that we can provide deeper levels of integration, like syncing grades from our platform to an LMS. So we just actually launched sort of a deeper level of LTI integration, which is the sort of the standard in which platforms can integrate in the education industry. We just launched that last week for MyELT. And for our new platform, Spark, the one that you just mentioned, we do offer what we call SSO integration today, which allows students and teachers to come into our platform without having to create a separate username and password directly from their LMS. Yeah. And in the next few months, we'll be providing even deeper levels of integration through that LTI standard.
Okay. You just mentioned MyELT, which is the other platform that we use today to deliver really online workbook, online practice type content. Some people say, how is Spark different from MyELT? It really has to do with that kind of all-in-one ease of use point that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, if you think about MyELT today, it's a great platform. It's been around for a long time, but in all intents and purposes, it's really just a homework platform. It helps customers get really one job done, which is administering homework. If teachers want to, teach using the ebook or the classroom presentation tool, MyELT can help them with that. If they want to administer tests, they have to go somewhere else. So I think of MyELT as great for what it does, which is really for homework. But Spark is great at helping teachers and students get all of the different things that they're trying to do done in that one platform, whether it's working in class, working outside of class on homework, working on tests in class or outside of class, and so on.
Yeah. I also saw a comment, it was a little bit ago in the chat, so I forget who it came from. But the comment was, students used to move from classroom to classroom and the teacher had their environment where they knew they had their tools, they had their CPT on USB, they knew where everything was. But now teachers are at this institution are moving around a lot more. Students are staying in one place and they need to be able to access the platform whether they're on one side of the building or the other, right? So, you know, I think we think about those types of things through the fact that it's on an online platform that can be accessed anywhere where there's an internet connection behind a single login, but also through some of the other tools that you've developed, like the apps, right? For offline use if you're going different places. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's no secret that teachers need to be able to present content during class, regardless of whether their classroom has an internet connection or not. And students need to be able to complete their work, regardless of whether their internet goes out on a given hour of a given day or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, providing support for students or for teachers, even in cases of internet outages was critical. And then the other piece, which you alluded to, was, people don't just have laptops. They access this content in all different sorts of devices.
Right.
And another limitation that came out loud and clear in our research was just how difficult it is to use these publisher platforms if you're on a phone. And that's been a big focus of our Spark platform, is making sure that the content is mobile friendly and that kind of can be accessed offline in case you do lose the internet, or you're going to be offline for a few days. So those have been sort of key pillars of our strategy with Spark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A couple more questions that are coming into the Q&A box. Lucas is asking about grading for kind of more open-ended output, right? So we want students to write, we want them to speak, we want them to communicate in English. A lot of the activities in the platform are auto-graded, which is great for saving time. And that's great for certain types of lessons, right? A grammar lesson, multiple choice, auto-grade. But the platform can also support teachers going in to assess more open-ended output, the real types of communication we all want our students to be able to achieve. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the importance of speaking and writing
Mm-hmm.
in learning English, that is absolutely critical. And we can't just limit our platforms to things that we can automatically grade. A lot of our student book content is about speaking activities, getting together with a peer and discussing a topic to practice your English skills. And a lot of our homework activities are about writing, practicing writing. So yes, we have a myriad of activities that are more open-ended, that do require teacher input. We can't have technology and algorithms grade everything. But the beauty of having those in our platform is that when you actually then open your gradebook, you have a much more holistic picture of how your students are performing in the class and what they know,
Mm-hmm.
and provide it with just auto-graded activities.
Right. Okay. Well, Matt, I think this might be a good place to wrap the conversation today. Thank you so much for participating and joining us. I think your insight and expertise has been really interesting to hear from, and your experiences over the last couple of years in particular. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who's attended today. As I mentioned earlier, this is our last global webinar for 2022. So we'll be taking about a month off, but we will be back in late January with more sessions. So if you don't want to miss those, you should go to our webinars.eltngl.com page to sign up to get notified when new webinars are scheduled. And we hope to see you sometime in the new year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.